Okay, so this is a quick video on overclocking the Asrock Z68 Pro3 motherboard. The system that I have hooked up here is a budget video editing system with a 2600K Intel processor. I will mention in advance that if you're already a seasoned overclocker, you're probably not going to find anything new that you don't know already in here. However, if you are either new to overclocking or you've tried overclocking with limited success in the past with this motherboard, then it may introduce you to a few options that will help you get a more stable system. For the sake of this video, I'm going to load the BIOS defaults just so that I know that the options that we'll be playing with are as you should see them on a new board. The first two options on the OC Tweaker tab, which is where we're going to start, are presets from Asrock themselves. I don't use them. I find that they're not particularly stable, give a little bit too much voltage. They're quite universal, which is perhaps not the best thing. So we're going to do everything manually. We'll move down now to the CPU control area. The first option you'll come to is one that most people do know about, the CPU ratio setting, which by default is set to auto. We're going to change that to manual, at which point you'll see a new field appear called max ratio. This number 34 is a multiple of the base clock, which is 100 megahertz. So if you multiply 34 by 100, that gives you the 3400 megahertz or 3.4 gigahertz that your processor is able to run at. You may have already tried changing these settings. You might have had a reasonable amount of success. A lot of people, particularly with this processor or the 2500K, could change that to 40, giving you 4 gigahertz without the need to change any other setting in the BIOS at all. But at one point you'll start to find that you'll be having trouble. Perhaps your multiplier is automatically throttling down for no apparent reason, and that's where we're going to start with now. I'm going to enter in here 44 to give us 4.4 gigahertz to start with, and then move on. The internal PLL overvoltage, this will help you get a more stable overclock on this processor at this speed. It isn't necessary, but at 4.5 gigahertz and beyond, enabling it will keep the system more stable, so we'll have that enabled for now. Speed step technology, this needs to be enabled. If you disable it, some vital settings will disappear that we need to change, so leave that on. And then we're going to move down to the next option, which is turbo boost power limit. Set to auto, we're going to change that to manual, and in here you've got a short duration power limit and a long duration power limit. I know on a lot of videos, I may be missing something, but on a lot of videos people are setting this to 250, 300, which in itself I suppose is okay. It's not going to do any harm, but if your processor is actually reaching a point where it's drawing something like 130 watts, then you're going to be toasting something on this board anyway. So I'm going to set this to 150, which should be more than enough. Before I change the next one, which I'm also going to set to 150 in this case, you'll see that 95 watts, that's the amount of power that the processor is allowed to draw for a long duration of time. At 4.4 gigahertz, this processor needs more than that. If it doesn't get it, then what you'll find is that the multiplier, if you're running something like I don't know, Prime 95, Intel Burn Test or something like that, when you're monitoring the processor, you'll see that it keeps fluctuating, it keeps dropping below the clock speed that you set it at, and that's because of the setting here in a lot of cases. So I'm going to change that to 150 as well. If you've got these changed and you're still having the same problem, enabling the PLL overvoltage may help solve that problem as well. What else have we got in here? The core current limit, I don't know if I just changed that or not, but try to keep it in line with the figures that you've got here. Host clock override, the base clock, do not change this, leave it at 100 megahertz, don't play with it. Anything that you do here is likely to cause you more trouble than it's worth, so leave it at 100 megahertz unless you really know what you're doing. Spread spectrum, yes, you could disable this. It will help with stability. Like before though, with this processor at 4.4 gigahertz, it doesn't make any difference, but as you move further up the scale, disabling spread spectrum will help you attain a more stable system. Moving down, DRAM configuration. I know a lot of people like to overclock the RAM. I do too, it's fine, but until you've got a stable system, leave everything at auto in there. Get your system stable, test it, run it, make sure everything's running okay, and only then come back to change your RAM settings. Power saving mode, that's the intelligent, no, that one we can leave alone. CPU core voltage, otherwise known as the vcore, set to auto. If you click on here, we're going to need to change this. There are two options available. I must say that the fixed mode doesn't actually seem to work on this board when I change it. Basically, so you can set the voltage that you want the processor to run at all the time. Offset mode has the advantage of allowing your processor to throttle down and use less power when it's idle, while adding a little bit of voltage to what it would normally have by default. As I say though, the fixed mode doesn't actually seem to be working for me very well. That's one of the reasons why I updated the BIOS to see if it made any difference, and I've had no luck. So we're going to change this to offset mode anyway, which is the one that I would probably use in everyday use. Okay. Don't add too much. If you're moving up in stages, you shouldn't be trying to get the maximum overclock immediately. Work your way up, try and find the sweet spot for the processor. For this CPU, 0.02 of a volt is enough to keep it perfectly stable. It can of course vary. You may have a 2600K that needs a bit more, you might have a 2500K processor that doesn't need any. It's all dependent on the processor, but you shouldn't need to add a huge amount at this point. Load line calibration, we're going to leave that alone. You'll see that's changed. That used to be set, I believe, to auto. I noticed in the release notes for the BIOS upgrade that I just installed, I've got version 1.6 installed. There was a reference to the to this, so I'm assuming that that's a change that's taken place with the BIOS upgrade. Right, all the other settings I'm going to leave alone here. Down at the bottom, you can see I've got a few defaults saved. You can actually save your settings now and load them up later if you want to play around. You can do that if you wish. Otherwise, at this point, you can reboot and give it a try. Do remember, however, that if you have loaded the BIOS defaults before following this tutorial, make sure you set back anything important, such as the serial ATA mode. Advanced tab here, it will default back to IDE mode. If you've got I don't know, an SSD, or if you're using native command queuing on your hard disk, you'll have probably had that at AHCI. If you don't set it back there, you will undoubtedly have blue screens for reasons other than overclocking. Alright, so good luck, and in the next video I'll have a look at taking the processor a little bit further.